Yes, and you touched on the hitters. I definitely like a lot of the hitters, especially at the top of this draft. And I think that I'm going to be going pretty hitter heavy in this draft. We'll see how it plays out, I guess. But I mean, without further ado, let's go ahead and roll into it, shall we? We're going to give Eric the first overall pick. We'll give you the honors, not only because you are our guest of honor, but because I think that you might potentially make a little bit of an interesting pick here at number 1 overall.
Oh, let's see here. Now you got me putting me on the spot. So there's 3 elite players in this draft that have kind of separated themselves. In the number 1 overall pick, Lee Rutschman, Andrew Vaughn of Cal, and Bobby Witt Jr., the prep shortstop out of Texas. You can't go wrong with any one of these 3 guys, to be honest with you. You could tell me that, hey, I took this guy, and I would not have any problem with it. Me personally, I think the best hitter in this draft and the best guy for fantasy is Andrew Vaughn, so I'm taking him here. He is just a huge power and average threat. Very clean swing, quick swing, gets natural loft. Dude is just built like a tank. He kind of has this, reminds me a little bit of Pete Alonso, maybe not quite the same power as Alonso, but better hit tool as well. I think this is a guy that could hit in the vicinity of 300 or better, while adding at least 30 plus bombs, with maybe some 40 bomb seasons in there as well. He's just a very advanced hitter, great plate approach, walks a ton, doesn't strike out as much as a guy with this type of power usually does. So, and the White Sox, I forget what the hell that field's called now. U.S. Cellular Field, whatever it's called now.
Yeah.
I can't keep track.
No,
I can't keep track. Is that what it's called now?
Super duper great rate on your credit cards field, I think is what it actually
is. Something like that. I can't keep track. I sort of like Fenway and Yankee Stadium. Who knows anymore what these places are called, but good hitters park there too. So this is a guy I think you're gonna plop him. This would be a very dynamic like 3-4 with him and Eloy Jimenez in a few years. Then you got Luis Robert as well. But yeah, I think Vaughn is the top hitter in this draft, so I'll take him.
All right, yes, and that is where I kind of figured that you would go, and I think that's interesting because a lot of people would have Rutschman number 1 just because of all the hype. Is that no doubt top tier catching prospect? But I will say no more because I think that that player might go off the board real quickly here, Ron.
Yeah, we talk a lot about how anytime we bring up these catchers, we bring up how we don't like them as prospects, and I've at least kind of come around as far as there's a couple of guys that I like. So I'll go ahead and take Rutschman here at number 2. And from a fantasy standpoint, I was actually sitting at number 2, kind of hoping that Vaughn would be there because I didn't know if Witt would go first either. But so I think with Vaughn or with Rutschman, I think that they're probably at the top. That when we're speaking from a fantasy standpoint, the 2 that are going to help your fantasy team the most. Switch hitting catcher. A lot of the scouting reports that you read compare him, and they say he's the best prospect to come out since Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper turned out to be pretty good, so I think that he's a very safe pick here. But I think also he kind of is the opposite of what we've been talking about with catcher. I think he's a very sure bet to stay there. He's got that mix of the hit tool, the power, and the defense as well. It's we talk about how catcher's kind of a wasteland when you're playing fantasy, when you're talking about your major league team. So I think he's a guy that will stay there for the long haul. He's going to produce. He's going to be, a solid 280, I think, hitter. 25, 30 homers isn't out of the question. Solid OBP. I think he's going to give you everything that you want from a catcher and from a fantasy standpoint in a position that's kind of become a wasteland the past few years. It's been very tough to get guys at catcher in fantasy. And I think a lot of times when when you look at that position, you're looking at guys that aren't going to hurt you, not necessarily guys that are going to help you. I think this is definitely one of those guys that's going to help you for sure.
Yeah, as far as catchers go, I mean, yeah, we know that anybody who's been listening for not even 100 episodes, just a couple episodes, know full well, my stance in particular and kind of the general stance that we have on catchers in dynasty leagues. It just takes so long for them to come around, and the bust rate is still really high, and it takes them a long time to come around even once they make the major leagues, just because they're adjusting to all the pitchers and working on their defense and so on and so forth. But Rutschman definitely seems like he is the complete package. He's worth that top 2 overall pick. But that said, I don't know. I'd be pretty torn between him and who I'm going to take here at number 3, Bobby Witt Jr. The name has already been mentioned. And I mean, I think everybody I've ever heard mention the name Bobby Witt Jr. just immediately comps him to Trevor Story. It's kind of hard not to. And he's got that similar skill set. Doesn't have Coors to call home, unfortunately. So we'll see how that affects him. But, just plus power, plus run. Just tons of upside here. We'll see how the hit tool comes along. It's a little bit more of a question at this point, but he's still super young, and just all the upside, all the talent in the world. So I feel pretty safe with Bobby Witt Jr. at number 3. So it's back to you for